Geese, the honking hooligans of the avian world, strutting around like they owned every pond, park, and patch of grass they waddle upon. With their long necks and beady eyes, geese always seem to be plotting something mischievous. Their default setting could be described as mildly aggressive, as if they're perpetually ready to start a turf war over a stray piece of bread. In the modern world, geese are often seen as nothing more than the annoying, cankerous busybodies of the bird kingdom, always ready to chase after anyone who gets too close, all while loudly complaining about the state of the neighborhood. But in ancient Rome, amidst the grandeur and triumph, geese existed as the highly esteemed, feathery guardians of the Republic. These geese weren't just your average honking nuisances. They were considered divine animals, the feathered intermediaries between the Romans and the gods themselves. Geese were devoted to the goddess Juno, queen of the gods and wife of Jupiter. The goose embodied her military aspect, Juno moneta, which means the warner, something geese are especially keen at. They were kind of like the ancient equivalent of a security alarm, but fluffier and with a lot more attitude. These geese were kept in the temples of the Roman Republic on the Capitoline Hill. The geese were well cared for and were so important that they were often fed better than the Roman citizens during times of famine due to their religious significance. One can imagine a scene where Roman plebs are scrounging for scraps while the geese are being served gourmet meals complete with tiny togas and miniature laurel wreaths. And one could say they deserved every morsel after their star performance in our story today, the tale of the Gaulish invasion, where the alertness of these stalwart guardians is said to have saved the Capitoline Hill, and by extension, Rome itself, from the barbarian hordes. The year is 390 BC, and the Roman Republic is still in its awkward teenage years, with a really big ego, but in reality, it's just a minor power struggling to control a few miles around the city itself, while dreaming of Mediterranean domination. At this time, Rome found itself at odds with a Gallic tribe known as the Sinoans. Enter Brennus, the commander and fierce warrior leader of the Sinoan Gauls, who was on a rampage down the Italian peninsula and was now threatening the nearby city of Clusium. Fearing that Rome itself might be next on the chopping block, the Romans predictably sent ambassadors from the esteemed Fabii family to negotiate peace. The ambassadors, being Romans, got a bit too enthusiastic and ended up killing a Sinoan chieftain. The Roman people were now in a bind, as the killing of the chieftain broke the sacred code of ambassadors. So a vote was held to decide the fate of those who broke the sacred conduct. But the Fabii were so popular that they were instead voted to some of the highest positions in Rome. Gotta love democracy. This understandably absolutely ticked off Brennus and his warriors, and they abandoned everything and decided to march straight towards the eternal city itself. The Romans were woefully unprepared for this sudden attack. Probably should have thought of that before killing the ambassador, but here we are. The Gauls marched with purpose, declaring to all the towns they passed that they would not harm them. They were heading straight for Rome. The Romans, in response, set a force to hopefully intercept the Gauls before they reached the city. The numbers are heavily disputed, but both sides most likely had 12 to 15,000 men. But the Gauls had hardened veterans, and the Romans mostly raw recruits and levies. To make matters worse, the Romans had earlier exiled the celebrated commander Marcus Furius Camillus on corruption charges. The battle was known as the Battle of Ala and was a disaster for the Romans, with many of the green Roman forces scattering to other nearby towns or back to Rome, while others drowned while trying to cross the Tiber River while still wearing their heavy armor. The Gauls were astonished by how easy their victory was, and it only took a few days for the Gauls to reach Rome, where they were again surprised, but this time about how lightly defended the city seemed to be. The light defense was due to the sheer panic following the battle. Only a small portion of the survivors were able to make it back to Rome. Many citizens had fled to nearby cities or the countryside, and the priests and priestesses of Rome had hightailed it out of the city with religious artifacts and valuables. That is, but for a few stubborn Romans who remained fortified on the steep Capitoline Hill, including the Roman Senate itself. The Gauls, after making their way into the city and executing any resistance, promptly attacked the sacred hill, full of confidence from their earlier victories. But for the first time, the Romans effectively fought back, easily holding the high ground and pushing the Gauls off the hill. The assault was a disaster, so Brennus decided to simply lay siege to the hill and sent some of his men out to forage for supplies. Here those men came to blows with the exiled Roman commander Camillus, who organized a resistance from a nearby town. Meanwhile, a respected Roman centurion by the name of Quintus Caedicius, who had survived the Battle of Alia, was now held out in the nearby town of Veii, and figured that Camillus would be the best man for the job in leading the counterattack and lifting the siege on the Capitoline Hill. However, to do this, he needed permission from the Roman Senate, who were entrenched on the hill. Knowing the city very well, he sent a messenger to sneak through the Gallic camp and scale the unguarded cliffside of the hill to deliver the message. Once the message arrived, it was quickly decided to restore Camillus to his command and give him dictatorial powers, as the messenger then snuck his way out. Unbeknownst to the Romans on the hill, their lives were now in even greater danger, as Gallic scouts discovered footprints on the cliffside of the hill and figured out that there was a way to scale the cliffs. With this new information in hand, Brennus decided to send his bravest warriors up the cliffside in the dead of night. The Romans had sentries and guard dogs posted on the sides of the cliffs, but exhausted from the siege, they slept and didn't notice the Gauls' stealthy ascent, something they would certainly regret. The sacred geese, however, did no such thing. As the warriors reached the top of the cliff, the sacred birds went ballistic, quacking and honking relentlessly. The geese raised such a ruckus that the Roman garrison was awoken. The first to respond was a man with the incredible macho name of Manulus, a name he quickly lived up to as he sprang into action. Probably still in his pajamas, he charged a few Gauls, cresting the top of the cliff. He killed one with his sword and pushed others off the cliff with his shield. Roused by the chaos, other Romans joined the fray and killed the remaining Gauls as they came up. Other unfortunate Gauls, still clinging to the rocks, had little hope of survival, as Romans threw javelins and rocks at them as they fell to their death. The geese had done their part, and perhaps strutted around, basking in the glory of their honking heroics. The Gallic leader Brennus, now certainly disheartened by the failure of the night attack, decided to continue to lay siege to the hill rather than attempting another assault. The Romans, led by exiled commander Camillus, started to organize for a counterattack from outside the city. During this time, the Gauls themselves began to suffer from disease and food shortages. With both sides in a difficult position and Camillus yet to arrive, negotiations were made to pay the Gauls to leave. As the humiliated Romans within the city loaded gold onto the scales, they noticed the Gauls were rigging the weights to make the Romans pay more than they first agreed. Brennus calmly threw his sword on the Gallic weights and said the famous words, "Ve victis," meaning woe to the vanquished. Successive generations of Romans would fight with great ferocity in order to never hear those words again. However, in a last-minute dramatic twist, before the weighing of the gold had been completed, Camillus reached Rome and ordered the gold not be taken away by the Gauls. The Gauls said that an agreement had been made, but Camillus, now with dictatorial powers, said the deal had been struck by a lesser official and therefore was invalid. Camillus then offered battle, and the Gauls were easily defeated. They were finally routed and crushed east of Rome. As the Roman playwright Livy later wrote, the slaughter was total. Their camp was captured, and not even a messenger survived to report the disaster of the Gauls. Thus, Rome was saved, not just by military prowess, but by the unassuming sacred geese of Juno. Every year following, to commemorate the anniversary of the night Rome was saved, a festival known as the Supplica Caenum, or Punishment of the Dogs, was instituted. This ritualistic festival was a harsh reminder for the failure of the watchdogs who slept during the attack, as each year new dogs were selected for sacrifice by crucifixion for the failure of their predecessors, in front of the honored geese, seated on luxurious purple cushions as they watched the unfortunate canines pay the price for their ancestors' failures. Talk about not letting sleeping dogs lie. Forever immortalized, the geese, with their honking and quacking, ensured that Rome's fate was not sealed on that night, and would go on to become the most dominant power of the ancient world. So next time you hear the honk of a goose, remember, it just might be the echo from a hero of ancient Rome. Alright, that's going to do it. Thank you so much for watching. This story is over 2,000 years old, so there are probably some inaccuracies here and there, or whether or not it actually even went down. I always say take ancient history with a grain of salt. There's a lot of different accounts, so take what you will. I still find it pretty entertaining and fun. If you enjoyed yourself, go ahead, drop a comment about any crazy encounters you've ever had with a goose. I know I've had a couple over the years, and go ahead and like, subscribe, and have a great day.